We are seeing our first images here. We must be very close to you here. We're seeing the back of Fidel Castro.
Yes, I'm standing right behind him, right behind the camera, actually.
Very good.
So.
And now we're seeing inside of this chamber. Where are we here? We know we're at the University of Havana.
Yes, this is the Aula Magna. It's in the heart of the university. It's a very beautiful room. I'm sure you're seeing the images of the room, or you will be.
Right. Well, we're actually seeing the motorcade now pulling up.
I see.
The papal motorcade is on its way to, I assume, where you are.
Yeah.
And
as I was saying, it's a very beautiful room. It's got huge panels of oil paintings with mythological themes, and it's an original part of this university. When the university used to be called the Pontifical and Royal University of St. Geronimo, until the Spanish crown took it over from the Dominican order. I don't know if you can hear that, Raymond, but that's the crowd really going crazy out there.
As they have every time the Holy Father has appeared at the masses and at all of his meetings throughout this visit.
Yeah, this group of people actually last week in all the parishes, the priests announced to the people in the parishes that there was going to be this new opportunity to see the Holy Father, and so all of these people have actually come here because they were told about this opportunity at their parish, at the Catholic parish.
Very recently. Now tell me, what can we expect from this event? Have you seen a lineup or an agenda?
No, unfortunately, we have been here, Raymond, since about 4 o'clock this afternoon. So we had to make a long, stand in line for many hours to get in. It's a privilege to be in this room because there's about 3 other reporters here with us. Most of the reporters are outside.
We are now seeing the motorcade. The Pope Mobile just passed, and we'll show you that footage now. There's the Holy Father. For those of you listening in on shortwave, the Holy Father is now approaching the University of Havana, where he is about to have this encounter with culture. Our correspondent Cecilia Domeco is on the line. She is standing just inside the main foyer, where the Holy Father will be appearing momentarily. And Cecilia, I'll hand it over to you now. What is the general feeling there in the room as the Holy Father does approach?
Everyone is looking, as I am, very anxiously toward the door, because we keep thinking that, of course, he's very close by. But as I mentioned, everybody's silent, very respectfully silent.
He looks like he's approaching now. The Pope Mobile
I can see it. I can't see it directly, but I can see the lights from the car. Of course, the security guards are looking a lot more anxious.
Yes. They're opening now the back of the Pope Mobile, and it looks like
and the music has started in here. The music has begun. This is one of the 2 pieces from the Cuban Mass to Our Holy Lady of Charity, and they've just begun to sing. I believe it's the Angelus.
Cecilia, if you would just hold the line for a moment, Deacon de los Reyes.
The Holy Father is just about to walk in the door now.
Yes. As he does, and we watch that, Deacon de los Reyes will give us...
I'm having a little bit of trouble hearing you because of the music.
Okay. Well, why don't we'll cut away from you for just a moment, Cecilia.
Okay.
We'll get back to you momentarily. Deacon de los Reyes, tell us what we have in store here.
Yes, the Holy Father will go directly to the place where the remains of the Father Felix Varela rest.
That will be his first stop
here. Yes, he'll pray. He'll pray at that particular place, no? And then there will be greetings from Cardinal Archbishop of Havana, Jaime Ortega. And then the rector of the University of Havana will also have will make a presentation, a speech, and then the Holy Father will say,
have his own address.
Yes, and that.
We should say, for those listening in via shortwave or those just joining us, this is Pope John Paul II entering the University of Havana for an encounter with culture. He's making his way in the main doorway here, where looks like he's shaking the hand of President Fidel Castro. Many cameras in the way, preventing us from really seeing. But we will now, that's Cardinal Ortega there behind the Pope. And there you see the Holy Father himself entering, with the Cuban President Fidel Castro there in the foreground. Of course, they are going to visit the tomb, or the monument rather, where the remains of Father Felix Varela are presently kept.
It's like an urn. It's like I was told that the beautiful chandelier on the Aula Magna was given to the university by the previous cardinal, Cardinal Arteaga. Cardinal Arteaga, rest in peace. He was the first cardinal of Cuba, and he donated that because of that's where the remains of Father Varela was. So he wanted to have this beautiful present for
a beautiful final resting
for the
place
aula.
for him.
This Aula Magna is
Yes, tell us what that
it's
means.
a classroom. It's like a huge, no?
Yes,
But
yes.
it's a magna, no? A
Big.
great aula, like Paul VI Aula Magna,
Right.
in the Vatican.
In the Vatican. So here you have the Holy Father entering and making his first greetings to the intellectuals and the artists assembled. Looks like Fidel Castro is pointing individuals out whom the Pope is graciously greeting.
I tell you, Raymond, I believe everybody in the world is looking at the Holy Father, not so much at Fidel Castro, but at the Holy Father.
It's quite a moment here to see the two of these men together and to see the Pope. He still looks like he's moving along with great vigor, considering the schedule he's been under, and it has been an exhausting schedule by anyone's standards. We should also talk a bit more about who Felix Varela is. He wrote extensively on the subject of human dignity and the need for enlightenment and the dangers of fanaticism. Of course, the human dignity part of his writing is very closely aligned and close to the heart of John Paul II. We've heard a lot about the dignity of the individual during this visit.
Father Varela was, he wanted to have a country where justice and liberty, freedom will exist. And under the Spanish crown, that was not the case. And so he was always writing for an independent Cuba. And
he was also a vicar general in New York, we should say. When he left Cuba, he went to New York, so there is an American connection here as well.
Actually, he was exiled into New York.
Yes.
Here, the Holy Father is right in front of the remains of
Father
Father
Varela.
Varela. And he's praying. He's praying. You know, Father Varela was exiled. The crown wanted to put him in prison. Wanted to jail him. Because he
of his
had
calls
been,
for independence.
He had been selected as one of the deputies from Havana before the courts. And in front of the Spanish courts, he was talking about an independent Cuba. So they persecuted him, and finally he had to escape to New York, and where he was already a priest. He had already received his bachelor in philosophy and later on in theology, and he was ordained already by that time. And then in New York, you know the rest of the story, the wonderful things that he did there.
Helping the poor, working with Irish immigrants.
He was an educator.
In the 1800s, we should say.
Yes, and he used to have small classrooms right next to the parishes where he was, and small schools for the poor. He was a beautiful man and a holy man, and this is why he's being considered very seriously
for canonization.
Exactly.
We should also say there was recently those who have put forth and advocated his cause for sainthood recently had a great victory. He is now the subject of a United States stamp.
Exactly.
Father Varela.
Exactly. He was honored by
as
a
that. Social reformer.
That's correct.
On the stamp. Something interesting. Another thing I saw. He didn't advocate armed revolution, but believed freedom begins in the soul, and the best weapons are spiritual.
That's what the Holy Father is saying these days.
So they are very akin to one another, and perhaps that's why you see this Polish Pope reaching out to his predecessor in faith, Father Felix Varela. Now the Holy Father is walking away from the monument containing the remains of the Cuban priest, and he's moving to a beautiful wooden throne behind a beautifully crafted table.
Beautiful desk.
Very elegant, long desk.
You see the Cuban coat of arms, coat in the back of the Holy Father.
How do you think these intellectuals are responding to the Pope coming here?
Oh, I think that in the bottom of their hearts, these people, they must be very much touched by the presence of the Holy Father.
The spiritual power.
Remember, these people are the ones that think too much.
Always a dangerous thing.
Yes, these are the ones that they probably confront the reason of their existence and so on, and what the Holy Father has to say is going to be very important to them.
But we will see.
These are the agnostics sometimes,
Absolutely.
Dear Holy Father, your presence in our most traditional and historic center of studies has a very particular reason. In this aula magna in the University of Havana, we kept with a lot of reverence the remains of our Felix Varela, the Father Felix Varela.
This is the voice of Cardinal Jaime Ortega.
The patriot and illustrious Cuban priest. Before him, we should all exercise his thoughts. Our first thoughts about our first cultural thoughts are associated with Father Varela's thoughts. Back in the 1800s, in the San Carlos Seminary, where he taught philosophy, and he also taught the constitutional development in the island.
No brotaron ni se manifestaron en sus orígenes y posterior desarrollo como dos realidades distantes o antagónicas, sino bien articuladas entre sí. Esta singularidad es también merecedora de la presencia de su santidad en este
The
lugar.
fact that he is the first who thought about the roots of Cuba and the independence of Cuba, deserves the presence, and also being a holy man, he deserves the presence of the Holy Father, and that's one of the reasons the Holy Father is there. Now I want to allow the director of the University of Havana, allow him to come and present his address. That was very brief, but right to the point.
Exactly.
He spoke of the priesthood of Father Varela and also of his interest in
the nation.
Into the nation.
Su Santidad Juan Pablo II,
Your Holiness, John Paul II,
Comandante en Jefe Fidel Castro,
Commander-in-Chief Fidel Castro
Presidente
Ruz,
del Consejo de Estado y del
President
Gobierno de la República de Cuba,
of the State of and the Republic
distinguidos
of Cuba.
miembros del séquito papal, Excelentísimo Señor Cardenal Jaime Ortega Lameno, Arzobispo de La Habana,
He is addressing all the
distinguidos
present.
Yes, this is
representantes,
the rector of the
Personality,
University of
yes.
Havana speaking
queridos
now.
miembros del Consejo Universitario,
He's
profesores
saluting everybody present
estudiantes
there.
e invitados.
There are professors and students also there.
Ha sido un verdadero privilegio
It's been a privilege
para la Universidad de La Habana
for the University of Havana
la selección del lugar
to select
donde hoy se realiza el encuentro de su santidad
this
Juan
place,
Pablo
this
II
room,
con el mundo de la cultura
for the
cubana.
encounter of His Holiness with
Y
the
es
world of
que la
culture,
Universidad
of
de
Cuban
La Habana,
culture.
Fundada real y
It is in the
pontificia
University of Havana,
en
founded
1728
in
y luego secularizada
1778
en 1842,
and later became
ha sido testigo,
or laicized in
escenario y
1842,
protagonista excepcional
has been
durante casi 3 siglos
a witness
de
for 3
acontecimientos
centuries
trascendentales
of
para
transcendental
la historia
happenings in the history and the
y la
culture
educación en
and the
Cuba.
education of Cuba.
Porque
in Cuba.
cuando en 1910 se edificó en lo más alto de la colina universitaria
In
el
the year
aula magna,
1910, this
era
room
este el
was
único centro de educación
built,
superior del país.
and the university was the only center of education in the whole
Simbolizaba
country.
la tradición científica, docente, cultural y patriótica.
And the university
Por
has
esas
always
mismas razones,
represented the
un año después
patriotic
se colocaron en este
and the
recinto
culture
los
of Cuba.
restos del presbítero
And this
Félix
is why in
Varela
this
y Morales,
room, the
que
remains of
representaba y
Father Felix
representa
Varela were brought
el
in,
punto de
be
referencia
here.
obligado cuando se piensa en el origen
because when we
de
think
una
of the
reflexión
origin
propia
of our
y
own
en las
independence
bases
and our
éticas
own
y morales
thoughts and freedom
de
and
nuestro
justice,
pensamiento
we have to go
y
back
de nuestra historia.
to Father Felix
Hoy
Varela.
son numerosos los centros de educación
Today we
superior
have many other
que a lo
centers
largo
of
y ancho
education
del país
throughout the island.
representan el lugar cimero del sistema educacional cubano. Por la diversidad de fuentes culturales de todos los continentes que la conforman y por la multiplicidad étnica de que se nutre, la cultura cubana es hija del mundo.
Says the
Lo
Cuban
universal
culture is
se
a
halla
daughter
en
of
sus
the world
propias raíces humanistas,
because of all the
cuyos atisbos se encuentran ya
participation of so
en la
many
obra de
in the
Fray
educational
Bartolomé de
process
las
in
Casas.
Cuba.
Durante 2 siglos,
For
esa
2
cultura
centuries,
adquirió perfiles propios. Y en
Cuban
el
culture
encuentro de los
created its
siglos
own
XVIII y XIX
identification.
alcanzó expresiones intelectuales autóctonas,
And in the
vinculadas
centuries,
a un
18th and 19th
proyecto de
centuries, already
desarrollo
had
académico,
its own
económico,
expressions,
social,
cultural expressions, Cuban
cultural
cultural expressions.
y científico que transfería al mundo de la sensibilidad y de las ideas la búsqueda de un desarrollo múltiple en el que se integraban la experiencia universal y nuestra propia realidad. En la segunda mitad del siglo XIX,
It's the second half of the
el
19th
modelo de la
century,
emancipación cubana, de profunda raíz humanista,
the time
cuya expresión más
when
auténtica
Cuba
era el anhelo de
was
alcanzar la
emancipated
justicia social,
and was able to
asegura
reach
su
its
verdadera
independence
dimensión.
and eventually
La cultura cubana,
social justice.
en ese sentido amplio, devino conjunto de aspiraciones y realizaciones del grupo humano que la creó,
There were
que la
many
asumió.
expressions
En su
at the
más
same
genuina
time.
expresión, en la cultura, la educación y la ciencia, se gestaba un ideario cubano, abierto y flexible,
It's
articulado
basically
al
this
proyecto de
explaining
independencia
to us how
y al establecimiento
all the
de una
thoughts and
república
all
con
the
todos
everything
para el bien de
that
todos.
happened at the University of
Como
Havana
se sabe,
through all this
la intervención de
last
una
200
potencia
years
extranjera frustró la república
was contributed
soñada
to the eventual
independiente,
emancipation of the island
justa y soberana.
and the independence.
Pero en los espacios logrados, los cubanos honestos que no renunciaron a la soberanía enriquecieron las ideas originales y convirtieron a la república dependiente y neocolonial en el crisol donde se continuó forjando la voluntad colectiva de luchar para alcanzar la verdadera y definitiva liberación.
Now he's referring to the fact that even
La
though
revolución
Cuba became
cubana
independent, that
Fue y
they
es
it
el
was
acontecimiento
the
histórico
presence of the United
resume,
States in Cuban history in the early years of
y pone en
independence.
práctica
It
un
meant
corpus
that
de
Cuba was
ideas
not really
que
independent.
tiene como
And
objetivo
then they says that all
la
the
plena y
culture,
auténtica
all
libertad
the
e igualdad
all the intellectuals in
del
the
individuo
country,
y de la
they
sociedad.
continue to fight to
Constituyó,
reach that
en verdad,
independence.
la integración de los sectores
All the writings
y
and all
grupos
the
sociales hasta entonces marginados, al ofrecer dignidad plena a todos. La revolución hizo realidad
now
el
he's talking
sueño de
about the
justicia
Cuban
social
Revolution.
de los forjadores de nuestra identidad nacional y de varias generaciones de cubanos que lucharon incansablemente por obtenerla.
Now
El
he's
pueblo
referring to the fact that
accedió a la educación y a la cultura.
so many Cubans fought for the
Se
revolution,
eliminó el analfabetismo,
and now he's
se estableció
talking
la
about the
enseñanza
accomplishments of the
gratuita.
revolution.
Se amplió la red de
Amongst,
escuelas,
it mentions that
se
the
favoreció la
eradication of
formación de jóvenes
illiteracy,
profesores.
the
Se
construction of
crearon
schools,
centenares de nuevos centros de nivel medio.
the construction of
Se
high
instauró el
schools,
sistema de becas universitarias.
also other universities.
Se modernizaron las estrategias educativas al combinarse armónicamente
They say
la
that they
docencia,
modernized
la
methods of teaching
investigación, el trabajo y la
in
práctica
the areas of
social,
investigation
y por su profundo contenido
and the
humano
relationship between the
se concedió
studies and
particular
work.
importancia a la educación especial.
and they gave a special
Todo ello permitió crear
attention
una
to
base
special
cultural y
education.
educativa capaz de desarrollar una sociedad
And all of
en la
this
que
has
sus
created
individuos podían disfrutar de una
a new
enriquecedora
society
vida espiritual.
where,
El pueblo cubano,
where the Cuban
santidad,
people can
se convirtió
enjoy
así
these
en un
days,
pueblo culto e
freedom.
instruido. Por otra parte, el desarrollo de las ciencias y de las tecnologías que tenían en
On the other
Cuba
hand, the
importantes
development of science and
antecedentes
technology.
individuales en hombres como Felipe Poey, Tomás Romay
Now he's
y Carlos J.
going,
Finlay,
going back to
convirtió
famous
esa tradición
Cuban
en
scientists.
un movimiento masivo que estimuló la creación de centros, grupos y programas de desarrollo.
So now he's talking about
El hacer asequible la salud
the,
a todos, desde la
what they believe,
asistencia primaria
what
hasta las más
Castro's
modernas
government
y
believes
complejas
is
técnicas,
another of
ha
their
permitido desarrollar un sistema nacional de salud
of the
que
positive
ha
things they
salvado
have done
innumerables vidas
in the area of medicine.
y que exhibe indicadores de
research.
calidad y de esperanza de vida que son orgullos de la nación.
And he says
Es
that
así
all
que
of
el
this
desarrollo de la
is
educación,
cause for
de la ciencia y de la
pride
tecnología
by all Cubans.
configuraron un pueblo con una particular comprensión y sensibilidad hacia los problemas de su país y de la humanidad.
Now he's saying that he has
Esos
that all of
hombres
this
son hoy
has created
creadores
a
de una
conscience in the
cultura
Cuban people to
cuyas
understand
fronteras se hacen más
and to be
amplias
proud of their roots.
en la medida en que se
and of
hacen
their
también
culture.
más rigurosas, profundas y humanas. Una cultura imbricada no solo entre sus diversas manifestaciones, sino también entre sus creadores y los que disfrutan de la creación. Miles de escritores y artistas
Thousands of
dan nuevos vuelos al
writers and
pensamiento
artists
y a la imaginación. Nuestra cultura
continue to
es la unión de Cuba con
be
el
part of
mundo.
our culture.
Es también la unión en Cuba y en el extranjero
Our
de lo
culture is also
genuinamente cubano.
the unification
En
of
las
our
4
own
décadas finales de este siglo,
and
este
the
quehacer se
world.
extendió y democratizó hasta alcanzar
He
dimensiones
says that
insospechadas.
in his educational system they are
Esencial define los
they
últimos
are
40 años de
intellectuals from
creación en la
many
sociedad
places in the
cubana.
world, and that's why
La
the
idea
Cuban
de
culture
la
these days
solidaridad humana, base
it's
de una
a
ética
culture
nueva.
that brings together not only the
La
Cuban
idea de la
but
equidad,
also the world.
de preferir el bien común al bien individual. La búsqueda de una verdadera y auténtica
Now he's talking
integración
about the preference of the
todos
Cuban
los
Revolution
componentes nacionales
to prefer
que trata de
the
eliminar
common good
prejuicios de cualquier tipo.
than the individual good.
La idea
In other words,
de un decidido
is
apoyo a los
talking about
pobres de
the
la tierra
socialistic approach
como
to
fundamento
government.
de la permanente recuperación de la memoria histórica del país. Una obra tan hermosa, sin embargo, se ha tenido y se tiene que desarrollar en las más difíciles condiciones.
So now he's talking about such a wonderful work
Que las crecientes
that
presiones económicas y
had to
políticas
be developed and
de la
still needs
única
to be developed
superpotencia
under pressure.
obstruyen cruelmente
Now he's
hasta el
referring
simple
to
arribo a nuestro país
he's
de la más necesaria de las medicinas. La
re-
praxis social cubana es profundamente martiana,
yeah,
porque
he's
se
talking about
fundamenta
that
en la
the
idea de
Cuban
nuestro
praxis is
apóstol
basically Marxist,
de que patria es humanidad,
and they
de
say
que
the
la
fatherland
cultura
is humanity,
es el diálogo de un pueblo
and the culture
consigo mismo
is the
y con el
dialogue
mundo.
of a country, of
De
a
que para
people
ser
within
libres
itself,
hay que ser cultos,
and to be
pero
free has to
también
be
para
we
ser
have to be
libres
cult, but
hay que ser iguales.
also
de
to
hecho
be free
y
we
de
need to
derecho.
be equals in rights
Somos
and
herederos de una intensa y fructífera tradición
and deeds.
cultural, cuyo componente más significativo ha sido la defensa de la identidad nacional.
He's
el
referring
empeño
now to
de fundar una
to
Cuba
how proud
cubana
Cubans are at
y
this
a la
time
vez una Cuba universal.
because they have defended their
Esa es la
national
patria
integrity.
que los intelectuales cubanos, profesores, investigadores, escritores, artistas, junto a todo nuestro pueblo, ayudamos a construir
This is the fatherland that all of us have built, has helped to
con
build.
talento,
The people plus all of us here present,
con esfuerzo
writers,
y con dedicación.
artists,
Una patria
musicians,
libre, una
a
patria
free
culta,
country, a
una patria justa,
cultural country,
una patria
a just
solidaria,
country,
una patria humana.
a human fatherland.
Y porque usted, su santidad,
And because
deja no dudarlo,
you, our
un
Holy
hombre
Father,
consagrado a la
you are a
defensa de sus
consecrated
convicciones,
man,
un hombre extraordinariamente
consecrated
lúcido,
to justice,
culto, un hombre de excepcionales cualidades humanas.
a man of exceptional
Universidad de La
human
Habana,
qualities, the University of Havana,
profesores y estudiantes,
his professors
y las
and students,
personalidades de la cultura,
and all the
el arte y la
personalities of our
ciencia que hoy
Cuban
se encuentran
culture
aquí,
present
nos
here.
sentimos honrados
We
con
feel
su presencia.
honored with your presence.
Su Santidad Juan Pablo II,
Your Holiness,
querido
John
compañero
Paul
Fidel,
II,
distinguido
dear
sean mis
comrade
palabras
Fidel,
un modo de acogerles en nuestra alma mater y expresar la
greet
mayor
you
gratitud por la asistencia a este hermoso encuentro.
and I welcome to our
Estamos
alma
seguros
mater.
de que el día de hoy
And
quedará
I'm
profunda
sure
y
that today
definitivamente inscrito en la historia
will
académica,
remain
científica y
in the
cultural
history
de la
our-
Universidad de La Habana y de nuestro
of our
país.
academic
Muchas gracias.
history in the University of Havana.
Well, now the president of the university is approaching the Holy Father. This is EWTN's live coverage of the Holy Father's trip to Cuba. He is now at Havana University, where the president just greeted him with an address that at times saluted the present system.
Yes,
And we'll talk about that after the Holy Father's address,
right.
who has now taken the podium. You're about to hear the words of Pope John Paul II. I'm Raymond Arroyo, joined by Deacon De Los Reyes of Radio Paz, Miami, who'll be doing the interpreting for you. They're doing last-minute adjustments here as they adjust the Holy Father's microphone to make sure that he's heard by all in the room and all of us and you at home. The Holy Father is flanked by
Cardinal.
academics as well as Cardinal Jaime Ortega, who is visible there on the right side of our screens. And now the Pope.
Señor Presidente de la República, gracias por
Mis-
su presencia.
Mr. President of the Republic, thank you for your
Señores
presence.
cardinales y obispos,
Cardinals, bishops,
autoridades universitarias,
university authorities,
ilustres, señoras y señores,
illustrious ladies and gentlemen,
es para mí un gozo
it's for me a joy
encontrarme con ustedes
to encounter you
en este venerable recinto de la Universidad de La Habana.
in this honorable
A todos dirijo
institution.
mi afectuoso saludo
I greet you
y en primer lugar
in first place.
quiero agradecer las palabras
I want to thank
que el señor cardenal Jaime Ortega
words
y
of
Alamino
Cardinal Jaime Ortega
ha tenido
Lamino
a bien dirigirme en nombre de todos para darme la bienvenida, así como el amable saludo
also.
del señor rector de esta
I welcome
universidad que me ha
The address of the rector of the
en
University
esta
of
aula
Havana,
magna.
who has received me in this aula
En
magna.
ella se conservan los restos
Here, the
del gran
remains
sacerdote y patriota,
of the
el
priest
siervo de
and
Dios,
patriot,
Padre Félix Varela,
siervo de Dios, God's servant,
ante los cuales
Father
he
Félix
rezado.
Varela.
Gracias,
Thank you,
señor rector,
Mr. Rector,
por presentarme a esta distinguida asamblea de mujeres y hombres
for giving me the
que
opportunity to
dedican
be here
sus
with this
esfuerzos
group of men and women
a la promoción de la cultura
that,
genuina
that work to
en
build
esta noble nación cubana.
the culture of this noble Cuban nation.
La cultura
Culture
es aquella forma peculiar
is a peculiar form
con la que
with
los
which
hombres
men
expresan y
express
desarrollan sus relaciones
his relations,
con la creación,
their relations with
entre ellos mismos y con Dios.
creation
formando el conjunto de valores
forming the
que
group of
caracterizan a un
values
pueblo
that characterize a country
y los rasgos que lo definen.
and all that defines the country, all the
Así entendida, la cultura tiene una importancia fundamental
the culture of a country has a very
para la
important
vida de las naciones
for the life of the nations
y para el cultivo de los valores humanos
and for
más auténticos.
for human values.
La Iglesia, que acompaña al hombre en su
The church
camino,
that walks
que
with
se
man
abre
in
la
its
vida
way,
social, que busca los espacios para su acción evangelizadora,
that tries to find
se
room
acerca
for his evangelization
con su palabra
action,
y su acción a la cultura.
also provides with his work and with his words
La Iglesia
for the culture of the
Católica
country.
no se identifica con ninguna cultura particular,
The church doesn't identify with any particular culture,
sino que se acerca a todas ellas con espíritu abierto,
what it does is that it comes or gets closer to
Ella.
each culture and each country
al proponer con respecto su propia visión del hombre y de los valores
to propose and to present its own
Contribuye
vision of human
a la
values,
creciente humanización
its
de
own
la
vision of
sociedad.
what man is.
En la evangelización de la cultura
In the evangelization of cultures,
es Cristo
is
mismo,
Jesus Christ
Él
himself,
que actúa a través
the
de
one
su iglesia,
who acts through his church.
ya con su encarnación,
He,
entra en la cultura,
through his incarnation, he enters into the
trae
culture.
para cada cultura histórica el don de la purificación
He provides to each
de la
historic
plenitud.
culture the gift of evangelization,
respetando y promoviendo la cultura. La Iglesia
doing so,
respeta y promueve
being
al
respectful
hombre,
of the culture,
al hombre que se esfuerza por hacer más humana su vida
The church presents
y por
the human dignity of a
acercarla,
man,
aunque sea a tientas, al misterio escondido de Dios. Toda cultura tiene un núcleo íntimo de convicciones religiosas,
each culture
de
has in
valores
its own
morales,
a deep relationship
como su
with God, a
Es
deep
ahí
religious
donde
presence.
Cristo quiere llegar con la fuerza sanadora de su gracia. Cuba. Cuba por su historia,
Cuba, because of his history
situación geográfica,
and his geographic situation,
tiene
location,
una cultura propia
has its own culture
en cuya formación ha habido influencias diversas.
in which in the formation of the Cuban culture there have been several influences, very diverse influences.
La africana, cuya religiosidad fue permeada por el cristianismo. La de los diferentes grupos de inmigrantes
Especially
y
the
la propiamente americana.
different immigrant groups
Es de
that came to
justicia
Cuba,
recordar
but is
la influencia que el seminario de San Carlos y San Ambrosio de La Habana ha tenido en el desarrollo de la
recognized in
cultura
the influence that the
nacional
seminary of
bajo
San
el
Ambrosio
influjo
has had
de
in the
figuras
development of the
como
Cuban culture.
José Agustín Caballero,
And now he's mentioning
llamado por Martí padre de los pobres,
He's mentioning
Teresa,
José de la Luz y Caballero, José Martí,
y el sacerdote
and of
Félix
course,
Varela,
Father Felix Varela,
verdadero padre de la cultura cubana.
father of the Cuban culture, true father of the Cuban culture.
La superficialidad o el anticlericalismo de algunos sectores
Now he's referring to the anti-clericalism of some
no son
in those times
genuinamente representativos de lo
are not really representative
que ha sido la verdadera
of the Cuban people.
idiosincrasia de este pueblo.
The real idiosyncrasies
Que
of
en
this
su historia ha
people
visto la fe católica
is being Catholic,
como fuente de los
Christian,
ricos valores
a country that has always seen Catholic
que, junto
teachings and
a
traditions
las expresiones típicas,
as the center of their lives.
canciones populares,
Everything in the Cuban culture,
campesinas
in-
y
from his
refranero
songs and
popular,
writings,
tiene una honda matriz cristiana,
they all have a very profound and deep
lo cual es hoy
Christian roots.
una riqueza y una realidad
And today
constitutiva
we still
de
see
la
that.
nación.
We still see the presence of Christianity and Catholicism
Hijo preclaro
in your
de esta
culture.
tierra es el padre Félix Varela y Morales, considerado por muchos como piedra fundacional de la nacionalidad humana.
Father Felix Varela, which is considered by many as the
Él mismo es en su persona
founder of the Cuban culture. He himself, in his
la
person,
mejor síntesis
is the best
que
synthesis
podemos encontrar
that we can find
entre fe cristiana
between
y cultura cubana.
faith, Christian faith and Cuban culture.
Sacerdote
Priest
habanero, ejemplar
from Havana, exemplary
y
priest,
patriota indiscutible.
and patriot.
Fue un pensador insigne
He was a
que renovó en la Cuba del siglo XIX
he was a
los
restless
métodos
thinker
pedagógicos y los contenidos de la enseñanza filosófica,
that
política, científica,
revolutionized
ideológica.
the methods of teaching and learning.
Maestro de generaciones de
A
cubanos,
teacher of several Cuban generations.
enseñó
He taught
que para asumir responsablemente la existencia,
that to
lo
be
primero que se debe aprender
really responsible for your own existence
es el difícil arte de pensar correctamente y con cabeza propia.
he said that the best way to be really responsible is to express yourself on your own with right thoughts and with your own head.
En estas tierras,
In other words, he said that Father Felix Varela encouraged people to think, not just to learn what they were taught, but to think.
como el proyecto político más armónico con la naturaleza humana, resaltando a la vez las exigencias que de ellas se derivan. Entre estas exigencias destacaba dos: que haya personas educadas,
Father Felix Varela
la
wanted
libertad y la responsabilidad,
to
con un proyecto
that
ético
there will be educated people
forjado en su interior, que asuman lo mejor de la herencia de la civilización y los perennes valores trascendentes.
In other words, he's talking about Father Felix
Al ser
Varela,
así,
that the father felt that there were
capaces
two
de
main,
emprender
two most important things that a person should have, which is one
al
is
servicio de la
to be
comunidad.
knowledgeable, to be educated, and the other one is to be
Y
spiritual
en segundo
and to be
lugar,
Christian, to be
que las
respectful of God.
relaciones humanas, así como el estilo de convivencia social, favorezcan los debidos espacios donde cada persona puede, con el necesario respeto y solidaridad, desempeñar el papel histórico que le corresponde
Now
para
he's
dinamizar el
mentioning that
Estado
that
de
every
Derecho,
person should have the right to
garantía
and the
esencial
space
de la
to be
convivencia
able to
humana,
express himself and to
quiere
carry
considerarse
on the
democrático.
historic
El padre Varela era
call that that person has.
consciente de que en su tiempo la independencia era un ideal todavía inalcanzable.
Father Varela, he said, knew that in his time,
Por
he
ello,
knew that independence in
dedicó
his
a
time,
formar
it was an
personas,
ideal. It was very hard to be obtained.
hombres de conciencia,
But then he decided
que
to
no
form
fueran
men of
soberbios
conscience.
con los débiles
He decided to
y
educate
débiles
people.
con los poderosos. Desde su exilio,
To teach them how to be proud of their own country and their
hizo
own
uso
culture,
de los medios que tenía a su alcance.
using all the
La
means that he had
correspondencia personal,
in his reach. That's
la
why
prensa,
he wrote
irá
so much.
que podíamos considerar su obra chimera.
Las cartas
a
del Elpidio,
Elpidio
that's the letters to Elpidio
sobre la impiedad, la superstición
regarding
y
superstition,
el fanatismo en sus relaciones con la sociedad.
anxiety,
Verdadero monumento
and
de
piety.
enseñanza moral
He said that
que
through these letters that
constituye su
you can
precioso
see
legado
the deep
a la
moral
juventud
concern
cubana.
and teachings of the Father Felix Varela for his people. He taught his people
Toda
to
la
think
vida del padre Varela
and to believe.
estuvo inspirada en una profunda
All
espiritualidad
his life
cristiana.
was inspired in a very profound and deep
Esta es
Christian
su
concern.
motivación más fuerte,
This was
más
his
fuerte,
greatest motivation,
la fuente de sus virtudes,
the fountain of his virtues,
la raíz de su compromiso con la Iglesia y
the
con Cuba,
roots of his commitment with the
buscar
church and
la
with
gloria
Cuba,
de Dios en todo.
to seek the glory of God in everything.
Eso lo llevó a creer en la fuerza de lo pequeño, en la eficacia de las semillas de la verdad.
That's why he
La
pays so much
conveniencia
attention to
de
the
que
little,
los cambios se dieran con la debida gradualidad hacia las grandes y auténticas reformas.
to the seeds of, when he looked at this, at the small, at the little,
Al final de
looking
su
forward,
camino,
looking to the future, to the greatness in the
momentos
future.
antes de cerrar los ojos a la luz de este mundo y de abrirlos a la luz inextinguible, cumplió aquella promesa que siempre había hecho. Guiado por la antorcha de la fe,
He said that Father,
camina al sepulcro en cuyo borde espero, con la gracia divina,
yes,
hacer con el último suspiro
he said that
una
Father Varela
protestación
was true to his last promise, which
de
was
mi firme creencia y un voto fervoroso
to proclaim the glory of
por la
God
prosperidad en paz.
and his beliefs in the Lord until the last moment of his last breath.
Esta es la
This,
herencia
this is
que el
the
padre Varela dejó.
the heritage that Father Varela left for us.
El bien de su patria sigue necesitando de la luz
And
sin
today,
ocaso,
his country continues to need
que es Cristo.
of the light of Jesus Christ.
Cristo es la vía que
Christ
guía al hombre
is
a la plenitud de sus
The guide
dimensiones.
that guides men to
El
his.
camino que conduce hacia una
He is the
sociedad
way
más
that
justa, más libre,
to
más
reach
humana y
a
más
more
solidaria.
just society, a more free
El
society.
amor a Cristo, la
The
Cuba,
love of Christ
que iluminó la vida del padre Varela,
that illuminated Father Varela's life
está en la raíz más honda
is in
de
the
la cultura
deepest roots of Cuban culture.
Recuerden la antorcha que aparece en el escudo destacado
Remember
de
or
estudios.
look at the torch that is shown on the coat of arms that is
Sino
right
también
behind me.
proyecta los propósitos y los orígenes de esta universidad, su
The origins
trayectoria y su herencia
of this university
marcan su vocación de ser madre de sabiduría y de
have made
libertad,
this university the vocation of being
inspiradora
mother,
de fe y de justicia,
inspirator of faith and justice,
crisol, donde se funden ciencia y
life for the people.
conciencia,
Well, those who
maestra
attend
de universalidad
will
y
find
de cubanía.
knowledge and wisdom and cubanía,
La
it's
antorcha
Cuban
que,
love, or love for Cuba.
encendida por
The
el Padre Varela,
light
había de iluminar la historia del pueblo cubano.
given to the Cuban people by Father
Fue
Varela
recogida poco después de su muerte
was picked up right after his death,
por esa
but
personalidad
by that
relevante de la nación, que es
personality,
José
that
Martí,
beautiful, splendorous personality, José
escritor
Martí,
y maestro
writer and teacher,
en el sentido más pleno de la palabra,
in the greatest sense of the word,
profundamente democrático,
profoundly democratic
independentista,
and independentist,
patriota, amigo leal aún de aquellos que no compartían su programa político.
and also
Él
he
fue
said
sobre
about
todo
Martí
un
that
hombre de luz,
he will be open
coherente
to
con sus valores
those that were not
éticos
in agreement with him,
y animado por una espiritualidad de raíz eminentemente cristiana.
that he was also of a very
Es
much
considerado
Christian spirituality.
como un continuador del pensamiento
He
del
is
Padre
considered
Varela,
like a continuator of Father
el
Varela's
santo
thoughts, and also an apostle of Cuba.
En esta universidad
In this university,
se conservan los restos del Padre
the
Varela
remains of Father Varela
como uno
are
de
kept
sus tesoros
as one of his own
más
treasures,
preciosos.
most precious treasures.
Por doquier en Cuba se ven también los monumentos
All over Cuba,
que la
I
veneración
have
de
also
los
seen
cubanos ha llevado a
monuments
José Martí.
built to the Apostle José Martí.
Y estoy convencido
And I am convinced
de que este pueblo
that these people
ha heredado las virtudes humanas de matriz cristiana,
have spread the virtues, the human virtues of the Christian faith
todos los cubanos
throughout their country,
participan solidariamente de su impronta cultural.
and that all Cubans participate of
En
the
Cuba
heritage of this.
se puede hablar de un diálogo cultural fecundo, que es garantía de un crecimiento más armónico y de un incremento de iniciativas y de creatividad de la sociedad civil. En este país,
He's talking about the creativity
la
of the
mayor
Cubans
parte de los artífices de la cultura,
and the spontaneous manifestation
católicos y no católicos,
of the
creyentes
Cubans
y no
in
creyentes,
in all the expressions
son
of the
hombres
culture.
del diálogo,
He's talking about
capaces de proponer,
the need
de
for
escuchar.
for dialogue, to be able to for
Los
people to
animo
dialogue without
a proseguir en sus esfuerzos por encontrar una síntesis
he's
que
encouraging
hará que todos
Cubans
los
to come
cubanos
together and to talk and to
puedan
find an
identificarse,
answer for all things
a
that separate
buscar
them,
el modo
find a way
de consolidar una identidad cubana
consolidate a
armónica
real Cuban Catholic identity
que pueda integrar en su seno sus múltiples tradiciones
that could
nacionales,
integrate in its
la cultura cubana,
all the expressions of
si está
of
abierta
Cuban
a la verdad,
culture and nationality.
afianzará su identidad nacional y la hará crecer en humanidad.
I believe he's saying that the Cuban culture, being Christian,
La Iglesia y las instituciones culturales de la nación
the church and the cultural institution of the
deben
nation
encontrarse en
must
diálogo
come together in a dialogue
y cooperar así al
and,
desarrollo de la cultura cubana.
and cooperate that way with the development
Ambas
of the Cuban culture.
Tienen un camino y una finalidad común,
Together they have one way and one
servir al hombre, cultivar
common
todas las dimensiones
way
de su espíritu y fecundar
to care
desde
for man
dentro
and all the dimensions of his spirit.
todas sus relaciones comunitarias y sociales. Las iniciativas que ya existen en este sentido deben encontrar apoyo y continuidad
The initiatives that already exist
en
in
una
this sense,
pastoral para la
they should
cultura,
continue
en diálogo
and find its support
permanente con personas
so
e
that it will continue.
instituciones del
I
ámbito
think he's referring
intelectual.
to the dialogue between the church and the government.
Peregrino en una nación como la suya, con la riqueza de una herencia mestiza y cristiana,
Yeah, in a nation like yours
Contigo.
with a heritage of
que en el porvenir los
Christian
cubanos
heritage.
alcancen una civilización de la justicia y de la
which
solidaridad,
the Cubans will reach
de la libertad y de la verdad,
an expression of freedom and
una
justice and
civilización del amor,
and
de la paz,
a civilization of peace.
que, como decía el padre
Like
Varela,
Father Varela used to say,
sea la base del gran edificio de nuestra felicidad.
will be the foundation of the great of the building of
Para ello,
happiness.
Me permito poner de nuevo en las manos de la juventud cubana,
Again, I want to
Aquel
place in the
legado.
hands of the youth, of the Cuban youth,
siempre necesaria y siempre actual, del padre de la cultura cubana. Aquella misión
the mission of
que
the
el
father
padre Varela
of Felix Varela,
encomendó a sus
the
discípulos.
same one that he asked from his
Diles
disciples,
que ellos son la dulce esperanza de la patria y que
saying that he said, tell them
no hay
that they are the
patria
sweet
sin
hope
virtud,
of the fatherland,
ni virtud
the youth.
con impiedad. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Very moving address by the Holy Father, very perceptive. As always, culture is foremost in his mind, has been for many years. You know, not too many people realize the Holy Father started a commission to study the connection between faith and culture in 1982 and was instrumental in refurbishing the beautiful Sistine Chapel, the masterpiece of Michelangelo.
Yes, yes.
Has always been very concerned about the treasures of the church, restoring them and keeping them beautiful and in their original form, as a means of evangelizing the culture, having something to bring into the culture that draws people closer to the church and to Christ. And I think that's what we heard here tonight.
Yes, definitely. And to tell you the truth, we will have to go back many times to read his words. They're very, very, very profound words. And at times I was not able to capture the whole meaning, but I in Spanish I will feel it, you know.
I think
We
you did a
heard the
beautiful
rector.
job. Take it from a gringo, you did a pretty good job from our
Well,
perspective.
The rector of the University of Havana, of course, he just kept the same line that we have been hearing for 40 years. But the words of the Holy Father were so refreshing. I'm telling them, yes, it's fine what you're saying, but you need to bring the church.
And Christ.
You need to bring the church, the body of Christ, into the culture. Into culture. You want a real culture. You have to bring the church. You have to bring the teachings of our Lord Jesus Christ. I believe the Holy Father now is going to present the rector of the university with a remembrance,
yes.
kind of a plaque.
You see them now exchanging gifts. For those of you just joining us, this is the
like
Holy
plaque,
Father's visit to the University of Havana and the remains of Father Felix Varela, a Cuban patriot and a priest in the Catholic Church. I'm Raymond Arroyo, joined by Deacon Rafael de las Reyes of Radio Paz, who just did the translation of the Holy Father's address for you.
I tried.
Oh, you did a splendid job. There was a beautiful moment where he said that the true evangelizer of the culture is Christ through his incarnation, and that he evangelizes the culture.
Exactly. That no culture is complete without Jesus.
Right.
And it is obvious. I mean, the Lord is the Lord is the Lord.
He also really created a whole new area of discussion here. Before the president of this country, Fidel Castro, he announced that Father Varela is the true father of the Cuban culture. And then he later went on to add, it was Father Varela's thought to unify faith and education. That was the very foundation of the Cuban nationality and the future of Cuba.
That's right. See, Raymond, without the presence of Jesus, nothing has a true meaning. Revelation, I mean, we thank God for revelation, no? I mean, we know who Jesus is, and praise God, we know. And we know that he is the Lord, he is God, and he made man. And he's the only one capable of giving us answer to all of our questions of existence. And he's the one that gives us salvation. So what can a country be without Jesus, without God? Even those who do not know Jesus,
it's important to know.
It's still, Jesus must be, Christ must be
central. And it's important to note, Father Felix Varela, his remains were visited in the 19th century by another patriot, Jose Marti, who called him a Cuban saint.
Yes. Varela died in the same year that Marti was born. No? And Jose Marti visited many times San Agustin, because that's where Varela died. After his exile in New York, where he wrote and so much, and he was approached many times by those that wanted to annex Cuba to the United States. And he never accepted to be part of that. He wanted an independent Cuba, a free Cuba. And while in New York, you know, all the beautiful things he did for the poor, I mean, that's where he really exercised his ministry as a priest. And as he was becoming older and older, the cold weather of New York was bad for him. So then he moved down first to Charleston and eventually to San Agustin, where he died.
To escape the climate. Here the Holy Father is again greeting Cuban President Fidel Castro as he makes his way out of this large, grand room at the University of Havana.
I wonder if in the protocol, this thing that they call protocol, I wonder if the Holy Father may have asked Fidel when he was all by himself with him, Fidel, why don't you confess?
That we can only speculate.
Yes.
You're getting ahead of the headlines here. Another interesting moment of this speech, he called for the reconciliation of all Cubans. I expect that was a call not only to the shores of Cuba, but beyond them, to bring all the Cuban people together.
Exactly.
And this has been a theme we've heard time and time again from the Holy Father.
Exactly. There is a lot that exists outside Cuba. There are a lot of intellectuals outside Cuba. As a matter of fact, many intellectuals from Cuba have already reached exile, and they are in exile. So we need to, all of us, come together. All of us.
We are seeing the final images here of the Pope leaving the University of Havana. At his side is Monsignor Stanislaw Živic, his trusted secretary, and to his left, Fidel Castro. They've just stepped from the building. A second handshake from Fidel Castro seems not to be able to get enough of the Holy Father. He's appearing with him at nearly every event. Originally, he was only to attend the Mass. Thus far, we've seen the President with him when he landed at the airport. Yesterday, they had a private meeting. And today, again, at the University of Havana, we see them together once more. The Holy Father making his way to the Pope Mobile, surrounded by his security. And according to our correspondent who was on the ground, there are throngs of people there who came to greet him. This was an unexpected visit by the Holy Father. They really didn't realize that they would be able to see him at this event. It was just recently announced, apparently, to the Cuban people themselves. And
we were not sure that we were going to be able to cover it.
Yes, originally, yes, this was a late add-on, this event.
Yes.
We weren't sure whether it would be covered or not. We were very pleased to have brought it to you. And again, for those just joining us, this is the completion of the Holy Father's visit to the University of Havana. This was his encounter with culture. And he is a very cultural pope, as we've said throughout our coverage. He originally thought he had a vocation to the theater, to acting. He was a writer, a gifted playwright, a poet.
A sportsman.
A sportsman.
Tremendous skier.
A skier, and now, of course, the great philosopher pope. Right. And one that I'm sure will go down. His encyclicals and his writings have such penetrating insight. And it is largely because of the balance he has maintained in his life.
Yes.
The balance between intellectual, spiritual, physical pursuits. He truly is a Renaissance man and a wonderful example for us all in that respect.
That's why I thought that when he was listening to the rector of the University of Havana, imagine the rector of the university, no? He was saying to himself, yes, 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 yes. Yes, yes, yes. But you have to bring Jesus Christ.
Yes, he's heard all that
into
before.
The culture. Yes? Yeah?
And we should remember, as we begin to discuss some of the points he made and discuss Felix Varela for a bit longer, the Holy Father, as I said earlier, he created this commission to synthesize faith and culture. That is integral to his understanding of the person and his international understanding. Recently, speaking to a Vatican official not long ago, they said his great insight into communism in Russia was that he didn't look at the economic, he looked at the cultural. Okay. He saw it as a cultural war and a cultural revolution to be fought. And here we see
he looked at the man.
The man, humanity.
Yes.
And culture flowing from man, not from economics.
Exactly.
Or from some ideological model, whether it be capitalism or communism.
And the same thing yesterday with the family, today with the youth. He was looking at the husband and wife. Today he's looking at the young men,
young people,
at the young girl, at the young people.
And he's looking at not structure, which is what Fidel kept alluding to in his opening speech, but he's looking at the longings of the heart. Right. And the biggest longing of the heart, of course, is for freedom.
And we are joined by Mary Ham, we should say, from Washington, D.C. You run a crisis pregnancy center. Tell us very briefly, what is that center?
It's Centro Tepeyac. It's a center for Hispanic women, primarily, and it's under the patronage of Our Lady of Guadalupe. And we've been in existence for 9 years, and we're seeing about 600 women a year.
And that is certainly a tool of countercultural a countercultural revolution in itself. Yeah. Now, while we talk about culture, the Holy Father also mentioned an anti-clericalism on the island of Cuba. Can you talk to that a bit?
Well, just the fact that I've been so surprised today that they're referring to him as Father Felix Varela. Whenever Castro, or in the books he's referred to as Felix Varela, they purposely drop the father. So here we have the Pope stressing the fact that you can't separate the man from his priesthood, and that's precisely what the Cuban Revolution has tried to do for 40 years.
He also mentioned Jose Marti. He claimed him as a Christian apostle, and he said he was an independent thinker, he was democratic, Christian, and had tolerance for views other than his own.
Exactly.
Your thoughts on that?
Actually, Jose Marti is one of the apostles of our Wars of Independence, and he's revered, by the Cuban people. He was a tremendous writer, very famous for his writings, and a poet. He is the Rubén Darío of Cuba. Right. Rubén Darío is this Nicaraguan poet, no? And he's and we really, I mean, it was I remember as a school kid in Cuba, we had every day, every 28th of January of every 28th of January we had to come in a parade and celebrate the birth of Jose Marti. It's like the George Washington of the United States, and he was let's say a student of Varela. Right. The important thing about Varela is that by the mid-19th century, the system of the educational system was one that where the students will listen to the teacher and will accept the teachings without questioning, memorize them and that's it. No, where Varela was teaching his students to think, right, to do research, to ask questions, to investigate, to do some other readings, and to, you know.
Mary, are we seeing that sort of educational system in place today in Cuba? When the rector of the university spoke, he saluted the accomplishments of the present government, saluting the construction of schools, the evolution of education, the study combined with the work. Is that in the model of
Well, I'll tell
Father
you,
Varela?
my nephew visited some local grade schools in Cuba two years ago, and he met with the children and they discussed and things, and he was amazed at how they are not taught history, and they didn't know who George Washington was. I mean, these were 5th, 6th graders, and you know, you'd say, okay, well, they don't know about American history, but in their own history, it's very sporadic what they've been taught.
Because it's been certain elements have been expunged.
It's been expunged, and
they
you can't have culture without history.
Exactly.
So another bombshell the Holy Father drops on this country.
They have been taught sciences. They have been taught everything but humanities. See, and yes, I don't want to sound, you know, I want to be objective, but believe me, I want to say the truth too. Yes, there's a lot of schools and universities. But one of the reasons why all of this were built and done was in order to be able to indoctrinate the Cuban youth and to teach them Marxism, Leninism.
And here we see the Holy Father, again, looking beyond the present regime, looking to the culture. And it's predicated on the faith. The faith is the wellspring from which he sees freedom and the culture being reborn.
It's fine to have so many schools and universities, but you had to bring the church into this. You had to bring Jesus into it.
And freedom of thought.
Freedom of thoughts, right.
Yeah.
And I would say it's not just to inject as an artificial injection, but to really understand the dignity of man based on natural law.
Exactly.
And that's where they've, you know, when the Holy Father said, with reference to abortion and the March for Life in Washington, that people have forgotten the distinction between good and evil. This is what happens in a socialist educational system that maintains no morality. And you can't, you know, Christianity aside, it's not a real reflection of what man is. Man strives for moral good. The 10 Commandments are universal longings of the heart, not just Christianity. So again, you can have societies that maybe don't openly preach Christianity in the system, but they've accepted the Judeo-Christian culture of natural law as the basis.
As we look back and reflect on this day with our remaining minutes, we had the Holy Father in the morning, a beautiful Mass at Camagüey, powerful speech to the youth, and in the evening, a challenge, really throwing down the gauntlet to the intellectual establishment of Cuba. What in the day sticks most in your mind, Deacon de los Reyes?
Well, definitely has to be the Mass this morning with the youth. The appeal of the Holy Father to the youth of Cuba. The call to commitment, the call to fidelity, the call to sacrifice, the challenge that he presented to to the youth.
And Christ as the prescription for the ills and the woes of Cuba.
Exactly, and you cannot achieve anything without Christ. I think that's what I said yesterday to the family. Today it was very more intellectual words, more
studied and somber.
Exactly, but in the bottom, that's the message. That's the message. Christ, Jesus has to be present.
Mary?
Ditto.
Yeah, ditto. You're not even going to go any further
yeah,
than that.
no, he's covered it. I mean, that's it. He's working at all the angles.
Yeah, and you
angles.
see, of course, today, youth and culture, the two great passions and obsessions of this Holy Father.
The Holy Father.
And both of them looking to the future. He's not a man of the past who dawdles with the relics of history.
He's a man of the future, right?
He looks to the future.
In his book, The Threshold of Hope, I remember once he was asked, well, you know, after 2,000 years of Christianity and there's so many divisions, you know, doesn't this sort of get you down? And he said no. And he said everything that happens for a purpose. And, you know, again, he sees opportunities where others see failure, you know.
Well, that will have to be the last word, and I look forward to seeing both of you tomorrow. Until tomorrow, we want to thank you for joining us for this EWTN News special coverage of the Pope's trip to Cuba, a journey of hope. Our coverage will continue tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Eastern Time with the world over. Our magazine program will present highlights of the papal visit thus far, followed by live coverage of the Papal Mass from Santiago de Cuba at 10:30 a.m. Eastern. So be sure to join us then. Until that moment, for Deacon De Los Reyes, Mary Ham, my dedicated producer Gary Gagnon, our executive producer Doug Keck, and all the staff and crew of EWTN News, I'm Raymond Arroyo, wishing you a good evening, and we'll see you tomorrow with more of the Pope in Cuba.